Sentry mode activated. Target acquired.
Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. I'm going to be doing a regular segment in Remnant for a little while, rather than do build videos, since honestly everything's kind of insane right now, everything works, there's a billion ways to do everything, so rather than do that, instead I'm going to be doing videos focusing around one item or one interaction of items. Then I'm going to make a bunch of builds that have a similar theme. I think that'll be a bit more organized at the very least, and that way you don't have to flip through a bunch of different videos with random builds thrown across them, and this way you can kind of just, look at a theme. So that being said, the first topic I want to start off with is the Hero Sword support. This is largely revolving around the Hero Sword and its new projectile beam. While the World's Edge also does have a beam, it's shorter range, does less damage, and doesn't stagger enemies like the Hero Sword does, so it's not as reliable. And on Apocalypse, it's just not a good option right now, at least for what we're trying to do. Anyway, the Hero Sword now throws a projectile like the Moonlight Greatsword, which unfortunately eats a huge chunk of stamina. So it's not really spammable unless you have a bunch of stamina reduction things, which is fine to build around. I just don't really think it's optimal at all. So instead, we're going to focus on using the projectile as support rather than the main source of damage, because as cool as it would be, if you're going ranged, just use a gun. To pair with a Hero Sword, we do have a few options. The first interaction here is rather simple, Razor Stone. This ring applies bleed on charged melee swings, which will let us apply bleed from afar with Hero Sword. This 2-item combo can open up a lot of possibilities, and since you're going to be using bleed, you can take advantage of things like Razor Wire Necklace for a bigger bleed and more overall damage, or you can use the Polished Whetstone for fat crit and crit damage. So if you want to run bleed and crits, you can do a Slayer Sniper setup with Corrosion on a gun and bleed on the sword. This set works amazingly well as a boss killer, well, at least boss killers have weak spots. Applying the bleed with the sword lets you run an extra mod slot since you don't need Phantom Knives or the Devastator. Something like Song of Swords or Hunter's Mark for even more crit is very nice. While you also can just do this with Devastator, kinda invalidates the whole point of using the sword to do it, and yeah, so different build, different video. The next interaction, probably the most important one, is with the Abrasive Amulet. This will let us apply corrosion stacks 2 at a time from range, since Hero Sword projectile counts as charged melee attacks. This is very strong on elite enemies and even more so on bosses, since it allows you to have corrosion and keep both your mod slots and weapon choices open to whatever you want. You can essentially pair these 2 items together with almost any set and it should work out pretty great. I can't even understate how important corrosion is. The defense penalty is worth using the slots and time to apply it always. Well, always on bosses at least. So corrosion and sword pairs really well with basically anything. Here's a setup using mod power spam courtesy of Spiked on the Remnant Discord. You might be wondering why we'd use this instead of Galenic Charm. Well, this is just better. Galenic Charm's 25% damage bonus is nice, but it applies to the base value of the mods, whereas the defense down of Corrosion is effectively a multiplier to everything since it applies the damage after all things considered. Obviously you won't be using the sword to apply Corrosion on most trash mobs and only tanky elites and bosses, so clearing is going to be a little bit more difficult than it needs to be, but I think it makes up for it with the bosses. We're using Ricochet Rifle and Twin Shots here because they're great at mod generation because they do multiple hits, and it also gives us our 2 free mod slots so we can run the tried and true Breath of the Desert and Unstable Quill swap. I opted for Provisioner's Ring here because I hate reloading the Ricochet Rifle, and it lets me swap much faster, and of course Ring of the Follower for mod generation. The third thing that the sword can do with bleeds is that since it's still considered a dot delivered from a melee attack, this dot will keep up Osseus armor. And so you can apply bleeds from afar and never lose your Osseus damage on bosses, assuming you keep the bleed up. This is fantastic. Osseus armor gives a 35% multiplier to all forms of damage, so you could effectively run anything with this setup. Here I'm using the Abrasive Charm to also apply Corrosion, because why not combine the 2 things we just talked about with an armor that appreciates both. Then I took Ice Spear for slows and that extra crit, and the Repulsor. Dude, not enough people use this gun. It's criminally underrated. The banish is great for keeping elites away in a pinch, plus the banish debuff works on bosses, so it lets you hit for some truly nasty numbers. But honestly, like I said, pretty much anything flies in this zone. You can keep up a huge damage boost by pairing Corrosion and Bleed with Osseus, and there's almost nothing you could do that wouldn't work here, except maybe summons. I mean, I'm not sure if the summons get the damage bonus from Osseus or not. I mean, if they do, great, anything works, but otherwise, okay, no summons. I mean, come on, this is even slightly stronger than the Slayer bonus for snipers. Like, yeah, this group of interactions here is just fantastic. I mean, so those are the three main things you can do with this sword. It's just great for status application. However, there are some other nifty tricks you can do. One of the great properties of the sword is that it typically staggers on hit to non-elite enemies, which does let you follow up with a shot before they get a chance to move. Because of this, you can run a pseudo stealth build, as the sword is also silent and, well, it doesn't draw aggro easily, so you can run Heartseeker to get a 100% crit chance against non-aggressive enemies. While not the most optimal of setups, considering that you can just run a crossbow and probably do this better, it does leave your weapons and mod slots free and is not limited on ammo. So if you're sort of going that route with the hunter's pistol or whatever, it can work well as an option if you need it. You can also use this as a range form of leech by either using the leech ember ring just to take hits from afar, or using the blood letters insignia and the razor stone to absorb all the bleed you inflict. Then pair it with like warlord's armor to keep you up or something. I mean, you could do anything, like I said. Also, don't forget the swashbuckler ring. It will let you generate ammo basically infinitely, and that alone with the hero sword can be a lifesaver. It almost invalidates stockpile circlet since you don't ever have to go find ammo anymore. And I did use this previously on that Osseus setup because Repulsor, as good as it is, lacks ammo. And with this, did not have a problem at all. Now I could go on, but I think you get the idea. The hero sword is an amazing weapon with a variety of uses, especially for supporting with status, and it can do range damage in a pinch. With the new items and interactions available, this sword has proven to become a staple for many sets, as it allows us to apply statuses without using our mod slots and without limiting our weapon options. That being said, I hope you find a way to incorporate it in your build, and that's basically all for me. So thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, hunters, and whatever you may be hunting.